always picture professional football superstars as living the perfect luxury lifestyle, so it's always a shock to learn that some aren't quite who we think they are. From smuggling 1,370 kilograms worth of cocaine, to organising a murder, and even a bomb threat. These are footballers who swapped a career of football fame for crime. And I just want to warn you now that some of these, especially the last one, are totally messed up, so please, you've been warned. Now to start with, we have the most decorated footballer of all time alongside Lionel Messi, Dani Alves. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison during January 2023 for forcing a woman into sex at a VIP bathroom in a Barcelona nightclub. What's surprising though is that he only served 14 months of that before being let free. A court in Barcelona agreed to Alves' request for temporary release whilst his appeal against his conviction was heard. He had to pay €1 million in bail, hand over his Spanish and Brazilian passports, stay in the country, and show up to court every week. This wasn't easy for him to do though, because despite being one of the greatest footballers of all time, Dani Alves had a bank account of minus €20,000. This meant he had to rely on one of his closest friends to help him out covering the cost of the legal battle, that friend being none other than Neymar. Now the theme of some of football's greatest ever players serving jail time unfortunately doesn't end here, as George Best, despite his undeniable talent on the pitch, was equally renowned for his off-field antics. He developed a reputation as quite the alcoholic ladies' man, eventually resulting in him leaving Manchester United. His life would soon turn as his alcohol problems got worse, greatly impacting his life alongside bankruptcy and a failed marriage. Finally, in 1984, he was found guilty of drunk driving and hitting a police officer, resulting in him being sent to jail for 12 weeks, where he spent Christmas. This experience was said to have changed him for the better, but in 1990, millions of people around the world watched his famously drunk appearance on the Wogan Chat Show. 8 months later, George Best was sent to prison for beating up a guy in a London pub, where in 1998 he left the flat that he had lived in for 13 years as he was kicked out. Alcoholism continued to plague Best, as in March 2000 he spent several weeks in hospital with a liver problem, the problem being that it only worked at 20%. Best wasn't the only footballer whose life was flipped on its head thanks to alcohol though, as there was once a prolific goalscorer for West Brom called Lee Hughes. He spent an evening in the pub drinking whiskey to the point he was over the legal drink-drive limit. The problems began however when he got into his Mercedes that night to return home. He was seen driving like a total madman before brutally clashing with another car. This left the driver permanently disabled whilst also killing a 56-year-old father in the process. Hughes then went on the run from authorities for 36 hours, fearing the consequences he would face, those consequences being a 6-year jail sentence. He was reminded in court that whilst his football career had come to an end, an innocent father's life had to too due to his actions. Unfortunately though, this wasn't the end of Lee Hughes' career, as after his sentence he returned to the sport. But whilst George Best claimed that his crimes changed him for the better, this couldn't be further from the truth for Hughes. Whilst playing for Notts County, he was fined after admitting to assaulting a woman at a hotel following the police being called out the night before an FA Cup game versus Sutton United. Next on the list is a former wonder kid who broke a record that should have never been a thing. He was the first Premier League player to play with a tag on during a game. You see, at just 20 years of age, Jermaine Pennant made his Premier League debut for Arsenal. Whilst it sounds like the start of a promising career, the red flags were present after it turned out he made his debut hungover. In spite of this, he scored a hat-trick. Personal problems would soon plague his life however, after he was jailed for 3 months for drink driving in 2005 after crashing his friend's car into a lamppost. After just 30 days though, he was released, where his club at the time, Birmingham City, stood by him, resulting in Pennant having to play the match with a police tag on. This wasn't his only drink driving related jail sentence, however, as he got 8 weeks after admitting to doing it once again. His career and personal problems didn't get any better after this either. After a spell at Real Zaragoza in Spain, Pennant forgot he had a Porsche which he left parked outside a station before finally remembering it, leaving him with 5 months worth of parking tickets to pay off. His love life crumbled after his dog killed his girlfriend's cat, which he hid from her after getting his friends to bury the dead body and paying cleaners to clear away the mess. After his retirement, he was declared bankrupt, with his mansion being left abandoned, where it was then taken over by drug gangs and turned into a cannabis factory, causing it to go up in flames twice in a single month. One of the more shocking and recent examples of a promising talent throwing everything away, however, is of course Quincy Promes. The former Ajax winger had an arrest warrant out for him after he smuggled over a ton of cocaine. He was convicted in February 2024 by a court in Amsterdam for his involvement in the smuggling of £65 million worth of the drug. In spite of this, he was living a life of luxury in Russia. During the trial, he continued to show off his wealth whilst seeking to make more through his organised crime connections, believing himself to be untouchable due to the Netherlands not having an extradition treaty with Russia. This wasn't the first time Promes caused trouble, however. During his time at Ajax's academy in 2012, he was actually kicked out for bad behaviour before eventually rejoining the club in 2019. Upon signing for them, he, like many new Ajax signings, are spoken to by retired detectives regarding the high amount of organised crime that the city attracts, urging them not to become a part of it. But it clearly had no effect here, as Promes admitted to making friends with the wrong people during his parents' divorce. It only gets worse though. When Belgian police caught the smuggling, detectives analysed encrypted BlackBerry messages which revealed Promes' involvement in a stabbing of his cousin over a stolen necklace. Thankfully, the victim survived after only being stabbed in the leg. However, the messages revealed Promes' intentions to do much worse. They read, "I didn't aim at his leg at all. I wanted to put it on his neck. Next time he will get bullets," insinuating his desire to commit murder. This landed him 18 months in jail and the need to pay €7,000 in compensation to the victim. Thankfully, Promes may have failed in his mission to evade Dutch authorities after jetting off to Dubai with Spartak Moscow. This is because the Netherlands do have a treaty with the UAE, meaning they have the people there to catch him. The surprise though is that whilst he was arrested in Dubai, it was for an entirely separate local offence. So whilst there's no final decision made just yet, despite the Dutch doing all they can to get him back to the country and in prison, this is definitely a footballer who threw away it all for evil. But talking of players that get involved with drug trafficking, the next one is a childhood friend of Pablo Escobar. And the funny thing is, you all know him. This is Rene Higuita, who you will all recognise for that iconic scorpion kick save. Suddenly, his nickname of El Loco starts to make a lot more sense. He was one of the biggest risk takers in football, being the first example of a goalkeeper playing with his feet. But these risks extended beyond just the football pitch, which led to a little goof which saw him miss the 1994 World Cup. What was this goof, I hear you ask? Oh, well, you know, he served as a go-between for Pablo Escobar and fellow drug trafficker Carlos Molina, delivering a ransom that resulted in the release of the latter's daughter. Yeah, but because Rene was being paid to do this, it thus, by Colombian law, counts as profit via kidnapping. He admitted that he had no idea such a law even existed, and that he did it for purely humanitarian reasons and would do it again if it was to help free someone. After 7 months, he was released without charge, but that was only after a 2-week hunger strike in protest. Another player you've probably all heard of, but this time for the wrong reasons, is Adam Johnson. That's because the former Manchester City player showed all the signs that he had what it took to be a decent Premier League footballer. Unfortunately, he knew this himself and used this position of power to sexually assault a 15-year-old girl in a calculated, considered and carefully orchestrated abuse of his celebrity status. This saw him jailed for 6 years. What's even more evil about this is the fact that Johnson showed no emotion whatsoever when he was jailed for what the prosecutors referred to as a single-minded pursuit of his own sexual gratification. He was stripped of his 12 England caps after he admitted to inappropriately touching and kissing the young girl on the first day of the trial before additional offences became known. Upon his sentencing in the court, the judge declared how Johnson had caused severe psychological harm to the girl 12 years younger than himself. He was also arrested, however, after it was discovered that his issues went much deeper. You see, he possessed extremely indecent videos on his laptop, which were led to believe involved bestiality. When this discovery was brought to Johnson's attention, however, it was believed that he simply just made a joke about it. Now, despite being optimistic of getting back into the sport after his release in prison, such an opportunity, rightfully, never came after he was let out after 3 years. It's said that he planned to write an open letter to all English football clubs begging to give him a chance before his family talked him out of what would have been a totally moronic decision to make, symbolising his inability to grasp the extremity of his crimes. He went on to apologise for his actions, but Adam Johnson has thankfully faded into complete irrelevancy whilst he desperately tries to get any semblance of a career back on track. A player on this list, however, that has enjoyed a career of the highest standards, including 2 Balon Do'Rs, is Ronaldinho. As if going bankrupt with just €7 in his bank account wasn't bad enough, he and his brother got held in a maximum security prison in Paraguay for over 30 days. The reason? A fake passport. His Brazilian passports were confiscated by the Brazilian authorities for failing to pay up charges levelled against him and his agent, who happened to be his brother. And so, when he was invited to a kids' charity event in his neighbouring country of Paraguay, he was handed a fake honorary passport. The thing is, as a Brazilian citizen, he's free to enter Paraguay without the need to present his passport or any kind of visa. But even his own legal counsel described their client as an idiot, which was backed up by the fact that the whole reason he was taken in by the police to begin with was because he presented this fake passport upon entry to the country without even needing to. The man who had become renowned for his smile and good vibes had instead been forced into playing football in prison, distraught at the situation he'd been put into. Now up next is Nizar Trabelsi, who was a professional Tunisian footballer who played in Germany. He had no desire for the life of football fame, however, as Trabelsi travelled to Afghanistan and met with Osama bin Laden on several occasions. Then in 2001 he was suspected of plotting to attack a US embassy in Paris, which was uncovered and stopped. His role in the attack was to blow himself up by wearing a business suit to hide the explosives before walking into the embassy. But that wasn't all. Trabelsi was arrested in Belgium on the 13th of September 2001. It was alleged that he and one other had conspired with Richard Reed to blow up 2 US-bound airliners using shoe bombs simultaneously. The planned attack led to Trabelsi's 10-year jail sentence. He was even found guilty of having weapons without a permit and being part of a private army. Nonetheless, after 20 years later, he was found not guilty by the American federal court. But the player with the largest sentence on this list is Bruno Fernandes, a former goalkeeper for Flamengo. And seriously, this story is beyond fucked up. It all started when he cheated on his wife with a woman called Eliza Samudio, who ended up falling pregnant with Bruno's child. He promised to break up with his wife in order to be with Mrs. Samudio, but it all turned sour when she refused to have an abortion, leading to them separating. Then on October 13th, 2009, the police received a call from her detailing how she was being kept in a private prison by Bruno and his friends, forced into taking abortive substances against her will. She claimed that they beat her up whilst Bruno held a gun to her head. He subsequently released a letter denying any allegations, claiming that she was merely looking for her 15 minutes of fame. She requested protection from a judge but was denied it, as the judge claimed Miss Samudio was simply abusing the Maria de Pena law. In February the following year, the baby was born, thus she tried to sort things out with Bruno, demanding child support whilst denouncing his assault. However, after arriving at Bruno's farm, she disappeared. Subsequently, Bruno abandoned his newborn son in a favela, who luckily was later found. Unfortunately, Miss Samudio never was. It was because Bruno had organised her kidnapping, where she was beaten up and killed by a Brazilian gang, where she was then cut up and fed to Bruno's pet Rottweilers. This landed him 22 years in prison, but the simply crazy part about all of it is that he still plays professional football. In 2019, his prison sentence was changed to a semi-open one. People who are in semi-open jail can work outside during the day, but they just have to return by night. However, because the prison didn't have the adequate facilities, officials just let him sleep at home and told him to stay there every night from 8 PM to 6 AM. So basically, at best, he got grounded for organising the murder of his own girlfriend. Bruno was given a release by the Rio de Janeiro Court of Justice in January 2024, where as long as he shows up in front of officials every 3 months, he can practically live his life as he normally would do, including playing football, as a team in Sao Paulo announced him as their backup goalkeeper.